Here's a knife I've had for quite a while. I bought it in early 2014 and I finally remembered to actually do a review. So let's take a look. This is the Enlan El-02 and it's a knife that a lot of people say, considering the price, offers a lot of bang for the buck or cut for the coin or however you want to put it. It goes for 15 to 20 US. And the blade material is 8CR13 MOV stainless steel, which is not an outstanding steel by any means, but for a cheap knife, it's pretty good. It's got G10 handle scales. It also has an axis lock. It locks into this cutout in the blade right there. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. If you look right here, there's the opening and it snaps in place right there. Pretty sturdy lock overall. Not as durable as a lock back, but pretty decent. And this also locks in place when you close it. See right there. So that prevents it from opening accidentally. You have to give it a pretty firm push. Alternatively, what you can do is hold this down and just flick it open. The good thing about that is in places where gravity knives are illegal, like Canada, for example, this is still fine because you cannot flick it open as it is. You have to hold this down and then flick it open. However, this takes quite a while to break in, I've found. And this is also one of the complaints I have. As it comes, if you judge it the way it comes out of the box, you probably don't have the greatest impression because this is extremely stiff. And the main problem with that is it's aggravated by the fact that you can probably see pretty well all these sharp ridges there. I don't know how anybody thought that was a good design, quite frankly, because this really kind of digs in and almost cuts into the skin. And this is a blister generator. So at first, this seems really, really unpleasant. And in fact, it still is. This thing still is quite uncomfortable. However, this was broken in very nicely. At first, this was really stiff, and also the pivot is not particularly smooth, and it most certainly wasn't at first. It's all right. I mean, it doesn't feel gritty, but there is quite a bit of resistance, which, of course, for a budget knife is to be expected. If you don't want to pay $50, $100 for a knife, then you can't really expect a buttery smooth pivot necessarily, even though some knives are pretty good in that. It's got a proprietary pivot screw, so if you don't have a specialized tool, you can't adjust it unless you improvise something. I noticed that there is a newer model out now on Amazon, which looks a little different. It has 3 holes instead of this shape. And the handle scales also look a little different. It's not dramatic differences, but you can tell that it's an updated version. It's got steel liners in the handle, and the G10 handle scales feel pretty good, as you would expect from G10. It's kind of a shallow texturing, not very aggressive by any means, but it doesn't have to be. It still offers quite a decent amount of traction. The shape is pretty simple. It's not particularly ergonomic, but also it's not uncomfortable. It just sits naturally in the hand. The corners here are beveled, so no complaints about that at all. Feels quite good. The pocket clip is fairly long and decently stiff. Pretty much the right amount, I would say. So carrying it is, well, unremarkable. It just sits in your pocket nicely. It's easy to draw, and nothing in particular to be said about that. The thumb stud is also, pretty standard. This one is comfortable as opposed to the lock. So you can either push it open like this, or as I showed before, flick it open like this. The blade is stonewashed, which this is what caught my eye, because at the time, stonewash blades in this price range I just didn't really see. And I personally like the look. So, purely cosmetic. Well, aside from, you can say it makes scratches show up less. Kind of camouflages them a little bit, so to speak, which is nice. Otherwise, pretty standard blade shape, I would say. It's a fairly long blade, which I personally like. Suitable for all kinds of tasks. It's got a hollow grind. You can probably not see that too terribly well. I've used this knife quite a bit for everyday tasks, so I've had to resharpen it. So this is not the sharpness out of the box. So it's kind of pointless to even show you the resharpened version. But, you know, people just like to see cutting tests, of course, I know that. So this is how I like it. The way it came was not quite as sharp, but not bad. The way it is now, it's pretty good. When cutting 2 layers of cardboard, there is quite a bit of resistance. So there are better blade shapes for that. But what I can say is that this was very quick and easy to resharpen. I used the work sharp as usual, and it just took a couple of strokes. Based on my experience, I would say the edge retention is slightly below average. Keep in mind, this is a subjective thing to say. Different people have different standards and different ideas on how to judge edge retention. I just went by roughly how long it took me until I had to resharpen it compared to other knives that I've tried. And, well, I wasn't impressed. It wasn't terrible, but you know, nothing to write home about, I would say. So, despite me nitpicking about a few things, well, to be honest, the lock is more than a nitpick. This is really quite an annoyance, and I actually plan to grind that down a little bit after the review. But, you know, despite these negatives, overall, I very much like the knife, because this is the kind of blade length and shape that I personally find pretty useful for a variety of everyday tasks, and you know, it feels pretty good in the hand. I'm generally a fan of axis locks. It also seems pretty sturdily built for a folding knife. I've thought about doing some tests like the spine whack, but frankly, I don't see much of a point to it. I mean, at what point through regular use are you going to do this? This is not happening generally, right? So I find it to be a somewhat pointless test. I mean, what you can do is, you know, hack a little bit into wood, which it actually does pretty decently well, I have to say. You know, considering that I'm just doing these really short little chops and this kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, a folding knife should not start to wiggle and fall apart from that, and this one doesn't. So that's really all you can expect from a folding knife, in my opinion. I mean, you wouldn't even normally chop into wood with a folder, so even that is somewhat beside the point. But just so you get an idea that it's quite well put together. So before I start repeating myself, let's leave it at that. In short, would I recommend it? Yes, if you're okay with a break-in period. There you go. Hope you found it helpful, and thanks for watching. Enlan The fuck is wrong with me? Considering the price... Why didn't I just continue talking? I had it.